Almost daily, the jets streak across Israel's borders. Under air cover of American-made Skyhawks like these, Israeli commandos recently stole an entire Russian-built radar station from inside Egypt. But most Israeli attacks are small, swift, and lethal responses to Arab raids or artillery fire. On the rare occasions airplanes go up against them, the Israelis maintain a kill ratio of about 8-to-1 in their favor. All of Israel's air activity has one major objective.
The Air Force today is the instrument that deter another major war in the Middle East. And the stronger the Air Force will be, the less chances we have to another all-out war between us and the Arab world. And I think this is the main role that the Air Force plays today in the Middle East, is deter another major war, and we're doing it very successfully.
Has the Israeli Air Force copied any other Air Force?
We're learning more than copying. And what we do is we try to understand what other people do, try to evaluate it, and then try to apply it to our needs, situation, requirements, and then we come out with our solutions, which in many cases are completely different and sometimes contradict other people's ideas and doings. The best example is the cannon. Years ago, most of the air forces in the world decided that the time of the cannon, the integral cannon in a Mach 2 airplane, are over. Then we didn't want to believe in it, and the Mirage has cannons in it only because we were stubborn enough, and we forced the French industry to leave it there. During the 6 Days War, out of 61 airplanes that were shot down in combat, 59 were shot down with cannons, only 2 with missiles. Since then, we shot another 50 or 60, I don't know, I lost the counts now.
Over 90% of the Air Force is made up of ground crews who never fly in combat. But if Israel has a secret weapon, it is probably their skill and dedication. During the war, they enabled Israel's 300-odd combat aircraft to fly 3,000 sorties in 24 hours, nearly twice the number that anyone thought possible. They did it by cutting the turnaround time between missions from an expected 20 minutes to an incredible 8 minutes, and they haven't let up since.
Technically, we have a very skilled people, and they have a technical mind. They can always improvise. Improvisation in this Air Force is unlimited. Actually, people really find solutions on the spot whenever emergency occurs, and then during the 6 Days War, the serviceability of this Air Force was all the time 100%.
In less than 2 years, these teenagers will be expert aircraft technicians. Israel is chronically short of manpower, and to ensure the maximum utilization of the people available, the Air Force has its own unique school. It transforms high school-age boys into skilled ground crewmen even before they enter the service. Most boys start at 16. They are all volunteers. Theoretically, they are still civilians. But they are trained as soldiers. At 18, like every Israeli, they will be inducted for at least 3 years military service. What makes the Air Force system different is that these boys enter fully trained and ready to start work immediately with the squadron. The tech school curriculum is designed to produce not only skills, but absolute dedication to job, Air Force, and country. In the first week, each class visits this replica of a Nazi concentration camp.
In the first stages of the training, we try to motivate them by, first of all, telling them a little about the history of our people, the Jewish people, and the state of Israel, and to make them understand that one of the purposes of the state of Israel is not to permit another terrible extermination of Jewish people or another Holocaust, as has happened before, but we're quite determined that nothing like that will ever happen again. And a strong Israel, a strong state, and a strong Air Force will make it possible for us to avoid things like that in the future.
The tech school provides the Air Force with over 90% of its ground personnel. The courses range from jet engines to radar. And whatever the course, the instruction is complicated by the fact that the Air Force has both American and French equipment. Students must work with both the metric system and the foot and inch. And they must learn to cope with two totally different systems of design and maintenance. Desert heat, sand, and dust are rough on modern airplanes. Some of Israel's French jets are older than the mechanics who repair them. So old that spare parts are no longer manufactured. The ground crews must invent new parts. Even for the new American jets, spare parts are expensive, and Israel's budget already strained. The Israelis spend lots of time and imagination in repairing parts, which our own Air Force simply discards. Unlike their enemies who receive their planes free from Russia, Israel must pay hard cash. The Phantom jet she is currently buying from the United States costs $3.5 million each. And the Air Force treats them not as machines, but as national treasures. The men who fly the jets have become modern folk heroes in Israel. Just how many pilots Israel has is a secret. And because they risk capture almost daily, most of their identities are secret too. As a group, they are skilled, confident, and very young. On the average, about 7 years younger than American pilots.
We in the Air Force say that there are good years for flying. And the good years of flying is between the age of 18 and the age of 30. The Air Force, in general, of military flying, is young people business. It should be young people business. And there are many, many advantages that young people has, and this is why the average age of our pilots is 23, 24. Flying requires a combination of qualities, and this is why it is very complicated. For example, in this country, if you stop on the street 300 young people of an age in an age of 18 to 20, out of 300 we find one pilot. After all the selections and everything, we get one good pilot out of 300 people that we stop on the street.
The search for that one good pilot covers the entire male population. At age 17, every boy in Israel takes physical and mental tests for compulsory military service. From these initial tests, computers select those who might eventually become pilots. Each of them receives a personal letter from the Air Force commander which reads, "Not everyone can fly, but we think perhaps you can. Why don't you try?" Almost all boys accept the challenge. At centers like this, they spend 2 days undergoing special Air Force tests, including a battery of devices which check aptitudes and coordination. The chosen ones come here to the Israeli flight school where the real testing begins. Only a small percentage finish the course. The exact figures are not disclosed, but the Israeli flight school probably has the highest washout rate in the world.
We get the cadets right out of high school. That means they qualify for wings when they're something less than 20 years old. We get him young and we train him young. And he doesn't get the chance to get all sorts of nasty habits before we get at him. We give him all the right habits, at least as far as we're concerned, and train him properly. We don't go in much for the parade ground and spit and polish business, but don't get the wrong idea. I mean, this picture of the happy-go-lucky Israel army where everybody's walking around in fatigues and the generals don't wear insignia and the corporal calls the general Moshe, it's not quite that way. Don't get the wrong idea. Discipline is discipline, and orders are orders, and people do what they're told to do, and exactly what they're told to do. Perhaps you don't see as much saluting and spit and polish and parade ground maneuvers, but I think we achieve what we want to achieve. After the kids come here, we have various methods to continue the weeding out process. One of these is the aircrew qualification tests. The outside test looks something like an obstacle course. What it is actually is we take this bunch of kids and a number of pilot instructors watch their behavior, And the kids receive an assignment. For instance, take a log from one side of a ditch to the other side of a ditch, transfer the log and all 8 of your people without falling into the ditch. Now, when you do something like this, somebody's going to start leading. Somebody's going to do the hard work. Somebody's going to volunteer. Somebody is going to just stay in the background and only work when he's told to. And you can learn very, very much about people when you run them through half a dozen tests like this. Another part of this process is the Piper Cub selection stage. We fly the cadet for a number of hours with a qualified instructor, not so much to teach him how to fly, but to see how he accepts flying instruction, how quickly he picks up things in the air, how good the coordination between his mind and his limbs is in the air. We know how it is on the ground because he gave him psychotechnical exams. But now we have to know how it is in the air. And there's some people who just, the moment the wheels leave the ground, and they may be very intelligent and very highly qualified, but the moment they're in the air, they stop thinking. They just get a mental block, and there's nothing you can do with them. These things we find out on this Piper Cub stage. Once a guy gets through all the various modes of medieval torture which we've invented here, we start to teach him something.
As the flight cadet progresses, he begins to encounter some of the things which make the Israeli Air Force different. One difference is that all flight instructors are operational pilots who commute from flight school to combat squadron. They judge the cadet not only on his skill, but on whether they would want him as a wingmate. Despite the fact that the IAF has more jet aces per capita than any other air force, the emphasis both in flight school and the squadrons is on absolute dependability rather than hotshot flying. Unlike their enemies, the Israelis can rely on their pilots not only to do their job, but to report the results accurately. It is the key to the whole Israeli doctrine of maximum results from limited means. Because of generally good weather, the Israelis spend far less time on refinements like instrument flying than most air forces. At flight school, they stick mainly to the essentials of maneuvering close enough to the enemy to shoot him down with cannons. In this, they are helped by the fact that they have captured and tested most of the latest Russian planes. Every pilot is taught their strengths and weaknesses and the proper maneuvers to shoot them down. And there is constant emphasis on gunnery, both air-to-air and air-to-ground. It was constant training like this that enabled the Israelis to knock out much of the Arabs' armor before it could get into action during the '67 war.
By the time we pin the wings on a young pilot chest, he's been through the meal for the last 2 years, day and night, 24 hours a day, and he has this certain qualities which we are looking so much among the young people of this country, and thank God we have enough of them.
Graduation day at the flight school. Israelis say that in getting through the flight school, the future airman has already won his toughest victory. Censorship prevented us from showing the exact size of this class, but it was not large. On one occasion, the graduating class consisted of only one man. And though the strength of the Air Force can mean the difference between survival and annihilation for Israel, the Israelis prefer to be selective. Rather than a lot of average pilots, the Air Force is built around a relatively small number of the best. Upon graduation, the pilot becomes part of a close-knit society made up of some of Israel's best and brightest people. Even the Air Force wives and girlfriends have a reputation for being the country's prettiest. The Air Force is so small that everyone knows everyone else. For the most part, all live together in base housing. They work together and they party together. And they do both with enthusiasm. Every dawn brings a renewal of the limited but deadly war which has become a daily routine for Israel's pilots. Those not scheduled for combat missions spend the day training for the next big war, which could come at any time. It is a tense and dangerous career, but for many pilots, it's also the fulfillment of a lifelong dream.
As long as I remember myself with the desire to be a pilot. I think when I've been 5 years old, I saw the first planes in the air. It was quite that time that I decided I want to be a pilot.
Like many Israeli pilots, Dov got his first real taste of airplanes in this Air Force-sponsored youth group, Havir. The Air Force provides instructors. Presently, about 3,000 youngsters are members. They build models and study aerodynamics, and some of them will become the next generation of pilots.
I think the most important thing in the Israeli Air Force that is the feeling you're a part of a family. This feeling makes you want to be one of the best kids of this family. I'm sure that I was very nervous on my first combat mission. But on the day you get into the plane and it's all loaded and you've got to pull the trigger, that day you're sure about one thing. You're sure that all the family thinks you are skilled enough to do your job. You're nervous on that day, that's for sure. That's your first combat mission. First time you dive down, and you dive down towards the fire. But you don't think about that. It's a great day for a combat pilot, his first mission. And I think one of my gladdest moments were the landing after that mission. It's like the bar mitzvah for a young 13 years boy. It's us, they're saying, from now on, you're graduated. You're not a trainer, you're a fighter. That's a great day for a pilot.
This Israeli pilot, called Nadov, spends most of his time farming on the agricultural kibbutz where he was born. Although the kibbutzim make up only 3.5% of Israel's population, they provide nearly 1/3 of the Air Force's pilots. At age 25, Nadov is already a veteran of 6 years flying, including the June War. Like all Air Force reservists, he leads a double life. The reservists are the backbone of the Air Force. The law requires them to spend about 40 days a year on active duty, but most of them voluntarily spend double that time to keep up their proficiency. Unlike the American system, Israeli reservists are fully integrated into regular squadrons. They not only train with the regulars, but fly combat missions with them. On one recent raid over Suez, 8 of the 12 pilots involved were reservists who had taken the afternoon off from their civilian jobs. Despite the constant fighting, the Arab guerrillas and
move a finger if somebody will kill Jews here. The world didn't do that before. There's one thing the Israeli pilot knows, that this work is what holding us here. And if you feel that there's no other possibility to remain here, there's no other possibility for the country, for the people, for us, for our kids to live anywhere, if you understand that, it gives you the courage to do anything in the world that could be done. Even some other people will say it couldn't be done, because that's your world. And if you can't change it, you must live according to its rules and do the best you can. That's a very hard way to live. But you've got to understand you've got no chance to change it. So you've got to do your best to live here.